We have a new Cronenberg film, and it's probably not what you expect.
While we every day bear witness to the catastrophic ecological collapse that is plaguing our planet, we must not forget that this is, above all, a human crisis.
Yep, we got a new Cronenberg film, not from David Cronenberg, the legend, not from rising star Brandon, but a first feature film from another Cronenberg, Caitlin Cronenberg. Obviously, we know David Cronenberg, an absolute legend, particularly up here in Canada, kind of reinventing the genre of body horror, creating films, legendary films like The Fly, more recently, a strong project in Crimes of the Future, and he actually has his latest film playing at the Cannes Film Festival in May, titled The Shrouds. Looks super fascinating, kind of semi-autobiographical, as much as you can in the weird David Cronenbergian way, but that film will essentially follow someone who creates a device to interact with the dead. I don't believe that David did that himself. Brandon Cronenberg is already having a super strong career, particularly with Possessor in 2020. He hasn't matched that yet with Infinity Pool, for example, but super, super talented. And now we have Caitlin Cronenberg, the younger sister of Brandon. Caitlin has worked as a photographer for many, many years now, mostly in the field of celebrity portraits. And I don't know how I didn't know this, but she actually took that iconic Drake album cover, you know that one. So she obviously has an eye for the visuals, for framing, for lighting, for all of these things that have at least some carryover to the film world. All of that being said, this is not your classic Cronenberg film. Caitlin herself has coined this film, the genre of this film, as comedy-gore. And I was fortunate enough to catch it at the second ever showing in Calgary with Caitlin in attendance, and going in not knowing much at all about the project, only that it is a Cronenberg film. It was not what I was anticipating, and that's not necessarily good nor bad, but it's different. Caitlin is kind of breaking out into her own lane, into her own avenue, and isn't just creating films that tie her down to this Cronenberg model. This project was written by Michael Sprague, who has been a close friend of Caitlin's for many, many years. She knew that she wanted to create this project, and they kind of collaborated to bring this script to life. It went through many iterations, many drafts, and Caitlin herself admitted that the first few were not great. What they ended up doing with each draft is giving it what she calls a darkness pass. So this film is a comedy, but it also aims to maintain some of that darkness. Each script, if it leaned too heavily into the humor, then they would have to kind of peel it back. And I'll talk in a minute here about how effective I think that was. Without giving too much away, this film is set in the somewhat near future where Earth is experiencing overpopulation and citizens are essentially asked to enlist, which in this context means giving up their life, and if they do so, their family will receive a monetary reward from the government. This is deemed necessary due to the crumbling environment, infrastructure, etc. as a result of human activity and overpopulation. I will admit the social messaging here didn't really do much for me. It was pretty on the nose at times. Yes, we are aware that humans are awful and we're destroying the environment, It didn't really approach it from any new angle there, and the first act of the film was a bit heavy on those social themes, kind of setting up this world and how our human activities kind of got us into this situation. There is also some kind of thematic ties to privilege and wealth. Of course, Caitlin is aware of the slight irony here, being a child of a renowned, famous director in David Cronenberg. So it's a little bit tongue-in-cheek, but again, the thematic implications, the social messaging is fairly surface level. Fortunately, in the second and the final act, that emphasis is kind of put to the side. And we can kind of lean into this crazy story that is about to unfold. This one is difficult to not get into too many spoilers because the trailer and the log line, kind of everything that has been made public, is pretty vague and doesn't truly dive into what this film is all about. Essentially, for one reason or another, this family assembles and one or more will need to enlist to essentially give up their life to the government. What unfolds is a single location film. Not what I was expecting, but it works for the most part. It's set in this kind of creepy manor house, this estate, very similar to the Knives Out film. In fact, I haven't looked at any reviews, but I imagine that there are many comparisons to Knives Out here with Humane. And I'm gonna be honest, I kind of like this a little bit more. I know that's somewhat blasphemous because Knives Out seems to receive just enormous praise, and I'm very neutral to meh on those two films. It's clear that Caitlin's experience as a photographer has helped her with the visual aspects of film. It's well lit, it is well framed, it's interesting. There's never any shot that seems kind of out of place, but at the same time, there are very few risks that are being taken here. It's a pretty safe visual language that is being used. There's nothing really bold or out of the ordinary happening here. Caitlin herself has admitted that she's fairly comfortable with kind of setting a shot up, but struggles with directing actors, particularly when it comes to dialogue. Fortunately, the cast here is fairly experienced, led by Canadian legend Jay Baruche, but also featuring Emily Hampshire from, again, the Canadian hit show Schitt's Creek, as well as Sebastian Chacon, a lesser-known name, and the absolute standout performer, with no one even coming close, in Enrico Colantoni. He plays a character named Bob in this film. I won't go into too much detail because he's not in much of the promotional material, but he steals every single scene that he's in. He is absolutely hilarious and gives one of the best comedic performances of the year. On that note, Humane works best as a comedy. I mentioned how Caitlin and Michael would run through these darkness passes when going through the script, and in the end, it's not all that dark. It is super, super funny, and I was incredibly surprised by how well timed these comedic beats were. Of course, that is in part due to the actors' performances, but it also illustrates that Caitlin does have a natural knack for comedy. Again, probably not what we were expecting from a Cronenberg. There, of course, are elements of violence, of darkness, of all of these things that Caitlin wanted to include, but it's certainly second to the comedy. This is not an edge-of-your-seat thriller. It's tense at times, but there's never more than 10 minutes of tension without these jokes kind of punching through. There is one moment in particular when it kind of looks like it's going back to this more classic Cronenbergian style where we might have some body horror and things are looking a little bit gross, but then right before we reach that kind of peak, we have a joke. And it lands and it's funny, but it's clear that Caitlin is attempting to kind of subvert our expectations here. She's not willing to lead us down the path that we think that we're going. There were some scenes cut from this film. One that I want to see, and hopefully it'll be on an extended cut or bonus features on a DVD, is a scene featuring Caitlin's father, David Cronenberg, who plays a neighbor. Unfortunately, we don't see David, we don't see that scene, but I would have loved to watch David play that old neighbor. At the end of the day, it's a good film. It is far from earth-shattering. It works best as a comedy rather than this dark, twisted thriller. I hope in the future that Caitlin continues to make films, and what I hope beyond that is that she's willing to take some more risks. Obviously, she's talented. She has been a successful photographer for many, many years. She has an eye for this visual language, but she played it safe. And I would love to see what she can do if she just goes for it. If you watched the whole video, appreciate it. You're the best. Like it if you don't mind, give it a comment, doesn't hurt, and subscribe, of course, if you aren't already. Do my best to post multiple videos a week, so watch the next one. Thanks.